My mom made my sister apologize for getting a 100 on a test, then grabbed her belt and said, "If you'd cared enough, you would have done the extra credit." When I tried to stand up for Leah, she smirked at me and said, "It's hard to feel proud of ungrateful half measures." I just stared at her. That was 3 years ago. Yesterday, she was escorted out of the courthouse without saying a word. My mom hit this saying into me ever since I was little. If you're not first, you're dead last. My 14-year-old sister Leah came home trying to hide her tears. She kept on apologizing to our mom and showed her test grade. It was a flat 100% on her math test, but at our school, there were sometimes opportunities for extra credit, and you could get more than 100 on your test. When she was double-checking her work, Leah skipped the bonus questions. My mom snapped back at her and said, "If you'd cared enough, you would have done the extra credit," my mom said, as she walked to grab her belt. Maybe it's because I was younger, but I for one could always see through our mom's BS. But whenever I tried to share my words of wisdom with Leah, she would shut down. "Leah, I don't think you need to be studying until 5 a.m. I let myself sleep. That's the difference," she'd always say, interrupting my attempt at helping her. By high school, she was class president and honor society president, tutored younger students for free, and was on track to be valedictorian of her graduating class. So one night she knocked on my bedroom door and had a complete breakdown for not being good enough. Apparently, one of the 4 kids she was tutoring had gotten a B+ instead of an A on their English test. I hugged her and comforted her until she stopped crying. Not because she was the failure that she thought she was, but because I could see in real time how much our mom's forceful perfectionism had gotten to her, how much it had rotted her soul. "Leah, I think you're the best older sister ever." I tried to sound as enthusiastic as possible to get the point across, but she just shook her head. "Shut the F up, Katie, I hate when you lie to me." And that's when I gave up on reassuring her, and instead tried to be her role model. I'd tell her whenever I got an A that was a 95% instead of 100% with a huge smile on my face, to show her that happiness doesn't always have to be found in complete perfection. During exam season, I made it a thing to always get 8 hours of sleep, and every morning I'd make sure to remind her of how rested I felt, how grateful I was not to have any brain fog. But I guess our mother noticed my antics, because she started wailing on me at least once a week, not directly, simply by forcing me to kneel in rice until I finally fell over. And as if this wasn't enough, she began to praise Leah at my expense. "Leah, you're proof that I did at least one thing right. Goodness knows not all my efforts paid off." Or, "I've only ever felt proud to be a mother when I look at you, Leah. It's hard to feel that way about ungrateful half measures." All this broke my heart, not because I cared about what my mother said, but because I knew that it would eventually cause a rift between us. And of course, I was right. As soon as Leah graduated from high school, she went NC with me. Her reasoning? I was a disappointment to the bloodline. And a year later, when I got into Stanford University, and not any Ivy League, they officially disowned me. My mom cut me off financially and told the entire family that I was extremely dangerous to be around. I expected Leah to be somewhat supportive, but instead she added fuel to the fire. She started sending stories about me into the family group chat about how I emotionally manipulated and abused her. But I just took it as an opportunity for a fresh start. I blocked everyone I knew from back home, got a job, and took out a loan. For the first time ever, I was free from my mom and Leah's impossible standards. But deep down, I always knew that Leah and I would one day be best friends. Well, I was in my sophomore year of college when I got the call, but it wasn't Leah. It was her best friend. I could barely make out what she was saying between the tears. "Leah, she, pills, hospital." My heart dropped, and I asked her to text me the address. It was a 6-hour drive, but I made it in 4. When I got there, Leah's room was a flood of IV drips and nurses. The sound of the heart monitor echoed off the walls. When her best friend found me, she lunged at me for a hug. I don't even know what happened. One second she was taking an Adderall to study longer. Next thing I knew, her pupils dilated and her skin was drenched in sweat. My stomach turned to ice. I knew exactly what had pushed her to take them. "Does my mom know she's here?" I asked, voice shaking. She shook her head and I breathed a sigh of relief. Good, don't tell her. She just nodded like she already knew. For the next 2 days, I barely existed outside of the chair beside her bed. I'd spend all day there working on my laptop, waiting for her to wake up. And eventually, she did. It was ironically the most well-rested she had looked since our childhood. I gave her a hug, not knowing what to expect, and she actually hugged me back. Her eyes flooded, spilling over before she could even blink them away. "I'm sorry, Katie." I wiped her eyes and told her not to be sorry, that I never blamed her for any of it. But there was one thing I wasn't telling her. At that moment, I hated our mother more than ever before. Abusing me is one thing, but almost taking the life of my sister is another. So I was going to make sure she understood what real consequences look like. I sat there in the hospital room, watching Leah's chest rise and fall with each breath. The anger burning inside me felt like acid eating through my veins. Our mother had pushed my sister to the brink of death with her toxic perfectionism, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. While Leah dozed peacefully, I pulled out my laptop and created a new document. At the top, I typed "evidence of psychological abuse" and started documenting everything I could remember. The rice kneeling punishments, the belt beatings over test scores, the constant comparisons designed to tear us apart, every cruel comment, every impossible standard, every moment that had led us to this hospital room. Leah's friend, Mac Victoria, sat in the corner chair, still shaken from finding Leah unconscious. She watched me type furiously and eventually spoke up. "Katie, what are you doing?" I explained my plan to document our mother's abuse patterns. Mac Victoria's eyes widened as she listened, then she pulled out her own phone. "I have texts from Leah, months of them. She was taking multiple study substances every day just to keep up with your mom's demands." My hands froze over the keyboard. Multiple substances daily? The situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Mac Victoria showed me message after message, where Leah described the pressure, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of disappointing our mother. In one text, Leah had written that she'd rather die than face our mother's disappointment over a B grade. A knock at the door interrupted us. A hospital social worker entered with a clipboard and a concerned expression. She introduced herself and explained that Leah's OD appeared to be related to academic stress, which required family notification as part of their protocol. My blood ran cold. If they contacted our mother, she'd swoop in and take control of everything. She'd spin the story, blame everyone but herself, and drag Leah right back into that toxic environment. I stood up quickly, positioning myself between the social worker and Leah's bed. I told the social worker that I was Leah's sister and primary emergency contact. I explained that our mother was the source of the academic pressure and that notifying her would be harmful to Leah's recovery. The social worker looked skeptical, but agreed to hold off on making any calls until Leah woke up and could speak for herself. After she left, I realized something crucial. Our mother didn't know Leah was in the hospital. She didn't know I was here. For the first time in our lives, we had the advantage. We could plan our next moves without her interference, without her manipulation twisting everything to maintain control. Mac Victoria helped me continue documenting. She remembered incidents I'd forgotten, times when our mother had publicly humiliated Leah for minor imperfections. She told me about studies study sessions where Leah would take med after med, desperate to maintain the inhuman pace our mother demanded. When Leah woke up again later that evening, she was more alert. I showed her what I'd been working on, the documentation of years of abuse. Her face went pale as she read through it. "Katie, you can't show this to anyone," she whispered, grabbing my wrist. "Mom would be devastated. The family would fall apart." My heart broke seeing her still trying to protect our abuser. Even after nearly dying, she was more concerned about our mother's reputation than her own life. I held her hand gently and tried to explain that our mother's behavior wasn't normal, wasn't love, wasn't acceptable. "I've been suicidal for months," Leah admitted, her voice barely audible. "But I was more afraid of disappointing her than I was of dying." How messed up is that? The confession hit me like a physical blow. My brilliant, accomplished sister had been suffering in silence, trapped in a prison of impossible expectations. Our mother's psychological control had become literally life-threatening. I spent the next few hours researching on my laptop while Leah rested. Legal options for psychological abuse, protective orders, documentation requirements. The more I read, the more I understood that we had a long road ahead. Psychological abuse was harder to prove than physical abuse, but not impossible. My phone started buzzing incessantly. Our mother's name flashed on the screen over and over. Somehow she discovered I wasn't at Stanford. The calls came in waves, each one more frantic than the last. I let them all go to voicemail, knowing that engaging would only give her information to use against us. Mac Victoria looked at my phone nervously. "She's going to escalate if you don't answer." She was right. Our mother had an extensive network of control. She knew people at Stanford, had connections everywhere. It was only a matter of time before she tracked us down. We needed to be strategic. I helped Leah craft a story for her missed classes that wouldn't reveal the hospitalization. We decided she'd claim she was helping a friend with a family emergency. It was close enough to the truth that she could maintain it without the stress of elaborate lies. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was my academic advisor at Stanford. Our mother had called the university directly, claiming there was a family emergency and she needed to locate me immediately. The advisor sounded concerned, asking if everything was all right and whether I needed any support. I assured the advisor that I was handling a situation, but that everything was under control. After hanging up, I realized our mother was already weaponizing institutions against us. She'd use any resource, any connection, any avenue to reassert control. Leah watched me with growing panic. "She's looking for you. She's going to find out. Katie, please, just call her back. Tell her something, anything." But I could see what Leah couldn't. Our mother would never stop. She'd use every tool at her disposal to maintain her grip on us. The calls, the institutional pressure, the family network. These were all weapons in her arsenal of control. The hospital therapist visited Leah that afternoon for a mandatory session. I asked if I could sit in, and Leah agreed. The therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Alexander, specialized in trauma and family dynamics. As Leah talked about the pressure she'd been under, Dr. Alexander's expression grew increasingly concerned. "What you're describing is called trauma bonding," Dr. Alexander explained. "It's common for abuse victims to protect their abusers, to prioritize the abuser's needs over their own safety. The fact that you nearly died but still worry about your mother's feelings shows how deep this conditioning goes." Leah shifted uncomfortably, but I could see her processing the information. Dr. Alexander continued, explaining how perfectionist abuse often escalated over time, how the impossible standards created a cycle of failure and punishment that eroded self-worth. After the session, I documented everything Dr. Alexander had said. Professional confirmation of abuse patterns, clinical terminology that could be useful later, evidence that what we'd endured wasn't normal parenting, but systematic psychological abuse. My phone buzzed with a text from our mother. "I know you're not at school. If you don't call me back within the hour, you're no longer welcome in this family. You'll have no sister, no extended family, no connections to your heritage. This is your last chance." The threat was clear. She'd destroy any relationship I had to maintain control. She'd turn everyone against me, just as she'd done before. But this time, I had Leah with me. This time, I wouldn't let her manipulation succeed. I showed Leah the text. Her face crumpled as she read it, the weight of our mother's cruelty hitting her anew. "She's threatening to cut you off from everyone," Leah said, her voice shaking. "She already did that once," I reminded her. "But here we are, together. Her threats only work if we let them." As the day wore on, I continued building our case. Every memory, every incident, every pattern of control and manipulation. I knew that confronting our mother would require more than just courage. We'd need evidence, support, and a clear plan to break free from her psychological grip once and for all. The sun was setting when my phone rang one more time. This time, I answered. I held the phone to my ear, my hand trembling slightly as Mom's voice came through sharp and demanding. She immediately launched into questions about my whereabouts and academic performance. I fed her the prepared story about helping a friend with a family emergency, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Her response was exactly what I expected. She interrogated me about my grades, my attendance, whether I'd submitted all my assignments on time. Even during what she believed was a crisis involving someone else, her only concern was my academic metrics. I recorded the entire conversation on Mac Victoria's phone, documenting her complete lack of genuine maternal concern. Mom demanded I return home immediately to discuss my priorities and responsibilities. She insisted that whatever I was doing couldn't possibly be more important than my education. I made vague promises about returning soon, then ended the call before she could press further. Leah had been listening from her hospital bed, her face growing paler with each passing minute. She started pulling at her IV tubes, trying to sit up despite her weakness. I rushed over and gently pressed her back down, but she fought against me with surprising strength. The panic in her eyes told me everything. She was terrified Mom would discover the truth, terrified of the consequences that would follow. Even after nearly dying, her first instinct was to protect our mother's reputation and prevent family drama. I spent the next hour calming her down, but her agitation only grew. She kept insisting I should go back to Stanford, that she could handle things on her own. The conditioning ran so deep that she genuinely believed facing our mother's wrath alone was preferable to accepting help. Mac Victoria pulled me aside while Leah dozed fitfully. She showed me more evidence she'd been collecting, screenshots of conversations where Mom had convinced Leah that I was jealous of her success, that I was trying to sabotage her achievements. The manipulation was systematic and deliberate. I realized then that our mother had been playing us against each other for years. Every comparison, every cruel comment had been calculated to ensure we'd never unite against her. The divide and conquer strategy had worked perfectly until now. The next morning brought a new crisis. Mom had escalated her search efforts, contacting not just Stanford, but also my professors directly. Several concerned emails appeared in my inbox, forwarding her messages about a family emergency requiring my immediate return home. I crafted careful responses to each professor, maintaining the cover story while assuring them I'd return soon. But I knew Mom wouldn't stop there. She had connections everywhere, former students she'd pushed to success, parents from our schools, family friends who believed her perfect mother act. Leah's condition improved slowly over the next few days. The medical team kept her under observation, monitoring her recovery from the OD. During her lucid moments, we talked about our childhood, piecing together the pattern of abuse we'd both endured. She told me things I'd never known, how Mom had intercepted letters from friends, claiming they were distractions, how she'd sabotaged Leah's attempts to join social clubs, insisting academic excellence was the only priority, how she'd convinced Leah that any relationship outside the family was a threat to her success. I shared my own experiences, the isolation at Stanford, the way Mom had poisoned extended family against me, the constant feeling that I was never good enough no matter what I achieved. We began to see the full picture of our mother's control. Dr. Alexander visited daily, working with Leah on recognizing the abuse patterns. She explained how perfectionist parents often escalated their control as children approached independence. The near-fatal OD was a predictable outcome of years of psychological pressure. During one session, Dr. Alexander mentioned that she'd seen similar cases before. Parents who viewed their children as extensions of themselves, who couldn't tolerate any deviation from their prescribed path. She recommended we start documenting everything for potential legal protection. I'd already been building our case, but her professional validation spurred me to be more systematic. I created spreadsheets tracking incidents, dates, witnesses. Mac Victoria contributed her evidence, and slowly we assembled years of abuse into a comprehensive record. Mom's calls became increasingly frantic. She left voicemails that alternated between concern and threats. She'd spoken to extended family, telling them I'd abandoned my education for unknown reasons. She painted herself as a worried mother, trying to save her ungrateful daughter from making terrible mistakes. The family group chat exploded with messages. Aunts and uncles reached out, urging me to contact Mom and stop causing her distress. Cousins shared how upset she was, how she only wanted what was best for me. The propaganda campaign was in full swing. I watched Leah read through the messages, her face crumbling as she saw how effectively Mom had turned everyone against me. She finally began to understand that this wasn't normal family concern, but systematic manipulation designed to maintain control. We decided to reach out to a domestic violence counselor who specialized in family psychological abuse. The counselor, Ms. Chen, listened to our story with practiced patience. She'd heard variations of it many times before. High-achieving children pushed to the breaking point by perfectionist parents. Ms. Chen explained our legal options. Restraining orders were possible, but required substantial evidence of psychological harm. She recommended we continue documenting while also focusing on Leah's recovery and establishing independence from Mom's control. The financial aspect was complicated. Mom had cut me off, but Leah was still financially dependent. We strategized about how to protect Leah's education funding while preventing Mom from using money as a weapon. It would require careful planning and probably legal intervention. Mac Victoria proved invaluable during this time. She brought Leah's assignments from school, helped maintain the cover story, and provided emotional support when things got overwhelming. She'd witnessed enough of Mom's behavior to understand why we couldn't involve her in Leah's recovery. One evening, while reviewing our documentation, I discovered something disturbing. Mom had been telling extended family that both of us were ungrateful and dangerous to family unity. She'd been laying groundwork to isolate us from any potential support system long before the current crisis. I cross-referenced dates and found that Mom's character assassination campaigns coincided with any attempt we made at independence. When I tried to spend a summer with friends instead of studying, she told family I was rebellious and disrespectful. When Leah had expressed interest in a less prestigious college, Mom had painted her as lazy and unmotivated to relatives. The pattern was clear: systematic isolation to ensure we had nowhere to turn except back to her. The realization hit Leah hard. She'd believed Mom's versions of events, had internalized the idea that I was a disappointment and she was the only successful daughter. We spent hours unraveling the lies Mom had told us about each other. She'd convinced Leah that I resented her success, while telling me that Leah looked down on me for not meeting standards. Every interaction between us had been poisoned by these false narratives. Dr. Alexander called it triangulation, a classic abuse tactic where the abuser controls information flow between parties to maintain power. By keeping us suspicious of each other, Mom ensured we'd never compare notes or unite against her. The hospital began preparing for Leah's discharge, which created new challenges. She couldn't return to her dorm. Mac Victoria reported that Mom had been calling the residence hall, trying to get information about Leah's whereabouts. We needed a safe place for her to recover while we figured out next steps. I used some of my savings to rent a small motel room near the hospital. It wasn't ideal, but it gave us a base of operations where Mom couldn't find us. Leah was terrified of the deception, still programmed to fear our mother's disapproval more than anything else. We established routines to help Leah recover: regular meals, proper sleep, gentle exercise, all the basic self-care that Mom's impossible standards had made impossible. It was heartbreaking to watch my accomplished sister learn how to exist without constant pressure. Mom's campaign intensified. She contacted Stanford's financial aid office, claiming I was mentally unstable and shouldn't receive funding. She told them I'd abandoned my responsibilities and was a danger to myself. The lies were calculated to destroy my future if she couldn't control it. I had to provide documentation to Stanford about the family emergency, walking a careful line between protecting our privacy and maintaining my enrollment. The administration was understanding but concerned. They'd seen parental interference before, but rarely to this extent. Extended family members began reaching out directly, some genuinely concerned, others clearly sent as Mom's flying monkeys. They reported back on our responses or lack thereof, feeding information to Mom about our potential locations and activities. One aunt, Mom's sister, surprised us by expressing private support. She'd witnessed Mom's controlling behavior for years, but had stayed quiet to keep family peace. She offered to testify about patterns she'd observed if we decided to pursue legal protection. This crack in Mom's narrative wall was significant. If one family member was willing to speak up, others might follow. We carefully documented our aunt's observations, adding them to our growing case file. Leah's physical recovery progressed well, but the psychological work was harder. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. She still felt guilty for not studying, for disappointing Mom, for potentially ruining her academic record. Dr. Alexander worked with us on deprogramming these responses. She explained how abusers created internal critics in their victims, voices that continued the abuse even in the abuser's absence. Leah's self-worth had become entirely tied to academic achievement. We practiced simple affirmations. Leah was valuable regardless of grades. Rest was necessary, not lazy. Imperfection was human, not failure. These basic truths that most people took for granted were radical concepts for someone raised under Mom's regime. Mom discovered I'd never returned to Stanford campus. Her threats escalated from disappointment to disownment. She sent formal messages stating I was no longer welcome in the family, that I'd forfeited any inheritance or family connections through my choices, things. The messages were painful to read, even knowing they were manipulation tactics. The finality of her words, the complete rejection of a daughter who wouldn't comply with her control, revealed the conditional nature of her love. But something had shifted in me. Instead of devastation, I felt clarity. Mom had shown her true priorities. Control mattered more than her children's lives. The threat of disownment lost its power when I realized her love had always been contingent on obedience. Leah struggled more with the family rejection. She'd built her entire identity around being the successful daughter, the one who made Mom proud. Watching that identity crumble was excruciating, but necessary for her healing. We connected with other survivors of perfectionist abuse through online support groups. Their stories echoed ours. Impossible standards, conditional love, psychological manipulation disguised as parental concern. We weren't alone in this experience. These connections provided practical advice too. How to establish financial independence, how to handle family pressure, how to document abuse for legal purposes. The collective wisdom of survivors became our roadmap forward. Mom's next move was predictable but still shocking. She began contacting Leah's professors and academic advisors, expressing concern about her daughter's sudden absence. She painted herself as a worried mother, trying to help her struggling child. We had to act quickly to prevent Mom from sabotaging Leah's academic standing. Working with the counselor and Dr. Alexander, we drafted official communications explaining the situation in general terms. Family crisis requiring temporary absence, medical documentation available if needed. The university was more understanding than we'd expected. They dealt with controlling parents before and had protocols in place. They agreed to communicate only with Leah directly and to flag any attempts by family members to access her records. As days turned into weeks, we developed new routines. Morning documentation sessions where we'd record any new contact attempts or family messages. Afternoon therapy work with Dr. Alexander. Evening planning for our future independence. The legal consultation revealed both possibilities and limitations. Psychological abuse was recognized but harder to prove than physical abuse. We'd need to demonstrate a pattern of behavior that caused documented harm. Leah's hospitalization helped establish that harm. We began the paperwork for a protective order. It felt like a drastic step, but necessary to prevent Mom from continuing her campaign of control. The legal system moved slowly, but we were building a solid case. Mom received word that we were pursuing legal protection, and her response was explosive. She rallied family support, claiming we were attacking her for being a concerned mother. She painted herself as the victim of ungrateful children who couldn't appreciate her sacrifices. Some family members bought her narrative completely. They sent messages about how hurt Mom was, how she'd given everything for our success. They couldn't see past the surface story to the systematic abuse underneath, but others began to question. Our aunt's support had opened a door, and more relatives started sharing their own observations. Stories emerged of Mom's controlling behavior at family gatherings, her constant criticism of our achievements, her inability to celebrate anything less than perfection. The family divide was painful, but necessary. Truth has a way of forcing people to choose sides, and Mom's carefully constructed image was cracking. Some relatives chose comfortable denial, others chose uncomfortable truth. We prepared for the legal hearing with meticulous care. Every document organized, every incident cataloged. The counselor helped us practice testimony, preparing for the emotional difficulty of speaking our truth in a formal setting. Mom hired a lawyer and began building her counter-narrative. She gathered character witnesses who would testify to her dedication as a mother. She compiled evidence of our achievements as proof of her successful parenting. The irony wasn't lost on us. She was using our accomplishments, achieved despite her abuse, not because of it, as evidence of her good mothering. Every award, every grade, every success we'd earned while suffering under her pressure became a weapon in her arsenal. But we had weapons too. The hospitalization records, the therapy notes documenting trauma bonds and psychological harm, the messages showing her prioritization of achievement over well-being, the pattern of isolation and control spanning years. As the hearing date approached, Mom made one last attempt at direct contact. She showed up at Stanford, demanding to see me. Security had to escort her off campus when she refused to leave. The desperation in her actions revealed how much control she was losing. I wasn't there to witness it, but received reports from friends. Mom had made a scene, crying about her ungrateful daughter, demanding to know where I was. The public display of her loss of control was both validating and sad. Leah watched me handle the situation with a mixture of admiration and fear. She was still learning that Mom's emotions weren't our responsibility, that her reactions to boundaries weren't our fault. The programming ran deep, but cracks were showing. We spent our final preparation days reviewing everything we'd built. The case was strong, the evidence comprehensive. We'd documented years of psychological abuse, demonstrated its escalation to life-threatening consequences, and shown Mom's continued attempts at control despite the harm caused. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and drizzly, matching our mood. We dressed carefully, professionally, wanting to be taken seriously. Mac Victoria came for moral support, our aunt promised to testify, and Dr. Alexander would provide professional context. Walking into the courthouse, I felt the weight of what we were doing. We were formally declaring our mother an abuser, asking the legal system to protect us from her. It was necessary but still heartbreaking. Despite everything, part of us had hoped she'd choose her children over her control. The courthouse hallway stretched before us, each step echoing against the polished floors. I clutched the folder containing years of documented abuse, feeling its weight in more ways than one. Leah walked beside me, her shoulders tense but her chin lifted with newfound determination. The hearing room was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate and less intimidating than the grand courtrooms from movies. Mom sat at the opposite table with her lawyer, her perfect posture and pressed suit creating the image of a respectable mother wronged by ungrateful children. She didn't look at us as we entered. The judge, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, reviewed the preliminary documents while we settled into our seats. Ms. Chen sat beside us, having agreed to represent us pro bono through a legal aid program. Dr. Alexander waited in the witness area alongside our aunt and Mac Victoria. The proceedings began with Mom's lawyer painting a picture of a devoted mother who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter's success. He presented report cards, awards, college acceptance letters as evidence of her effective parenting. Each achievement felt like a betrayal. Our blood and tears transformed into her vindication. When our turn came, I took the stand first. My hands shook as I described the rice-kneeling punishments, the belt beatings over imperfect scores, the systematic isolation from any support system. I explained how Mom had turned Leah and me against each other, how she'd weaponized our achievements as proof that her abuse was justified. Mom's face remained impassive throughout my testimony, but I saw her jaw tighten when I mentioned the documentation we'd compiled. Her lawyer objected repeatedly, claiming hearsay and exaggeration, but the judge allowed me to continue. Leah's testimony proved more powerful than mine. She described the escalating pressure, the multiple study sites, substances. The moment she decided dying was preferable to disappointing Mom. Her voice cracked when she explained waking up in the hospital, realizing she'd nearly succeeded in escaping the only way she knew how. The medical records spoke volumes. The OD levels, the prolonged recovery, the therapist's notes about trauma bonding and psychological abuse. Dr. Alexander took the stand to provide professional context, explaining how perfectionist abuse often escalated to life-threatening levels when victims approached independence. Our aunt's testimony surprised everyone, including Mom. She described witnessing Mom's controlling behavior at family gatherings, the way she'd publicly humiliated us for minor imperfections, the calculated campaigns to isolate us from extended family support. She produced old emails where Mom had systematically poisoned relatives against us. Mom's character witnesses inadvertently strengthened our case. They praised her high standards and dedication to our success, unable to see how their words confirmed the abuse patterns Dr. Alexander had described. One family friend mentioned how Mom had called her crying about my rebellion when I'd chosen Stanford over an Ivy League school. When Mom took the stand, her testimony revealed the depth of her delusion. She genuinely believed that pushing us to near-death extremes was good parenting. She showed no remorse for the hospitalizations, the isolation, the psychological torture. In her mind, we were ungrateful children attacking her for wanting us to succeed. The judge asked Mom directly about the study substance OD. Mom's response chilled the room. She claimed Leah had simply been overzealous in her studying, that it showed dedication rather than desperation. The judge's expression hardened at this dismissal of a near-fatal incident. McVictoria's testimony provided crucial corroboration. She'd saved years of text messages showing Leah's deteriorating mental state, the desperate attempts to meet impossible standards, the fear of facing Mom's disappointment. She described finding Leah unconscious, the terrifying rush to the hospital, Leah's first words upon waking being apologies for not studying harder. The evidence phase included our documentation, spreadsheets tracking incidents, dates, witnesses. The systematic nature of the abuse became undeniable when laid out chronologically. Mom's lawyer tried to dismiss it as selective memory, but the sheer volume and consistency made that argument weak. During a recess, Mom approached us in the hallway despite her lawyer's attempts to stop her. She didn't speak, just stared at us with an expression of bewildered fury. I positioned myself between her and Leah, maintaining eye contact until she turned away. It was the first time I'd ever seen her back down from confrontation. The afternoon brought more testimony from Mom's witnesses, but their words rang hollow after the morning's revelations. They spoke of a dedicated mother they saw at school events and family gatherings, unable to recognize the performance they'd witnessed. Their ignorance of our reality only emphasized how effectively Mom had hidden the abuse. Ms. Chen presented legal precedents for psychological abuse cases, demonstrating that our situation met all criteria for a protective order. She emphasized the documented escalation from emotional manipulation to life-threatening consequences, the continued attempts at control despite the hospitalization, the clear and present danger to our well-being. Mom's lawyer made a final attempt to frame this as a family disagreement blown out of proportion. He suggested counseling and mediation instead of legal intervention. The proposal might have sounded reasonable to someone who hadn't heard the previous testimony, but in context, it felt like asking us to negotiate with our torturer. The judge retired to consider the evidence. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Leah gripped my hand so tightly I lost feeling in my fingers, but I didn't pull away. Mom sat rigidly at her table, her perfect facade finally showing cracks as she realized she might actually face consequences. When the judge returned, her decision was swift and comprehensive. She granted the protective order, prohibiting Mom from contacting us directly or through third parties. She ordered Mom to stay away from our schools, workplaces, and residences. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. More significantly, the judge recognized the pattern of psychological abuse and recommended Mom undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and therapy before any future contact could be considered. She specifically noted that Mom's lack of remorse and inability to recognize the harm she'd caused made her an ongoing threat to our safety. Mom's composure finally shattered. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, her face contorting with rage. Her lawyer quickly guided her from the room before she could speak, but the damage to her image was complete. The perfect mother mask had slipped, revealing the controller underneath. In the hallway afterward, our aunt hugged us both tightly. She apologized for not speaking up sooner, for letting family politics silence her while we suffered. I assured her that her testimony today had made all the difference, that breaking the family silence had been crucial to our case. Dr. Alexander congratulated us on our courage, reminding us that the legal victory was just the beginning of our healing journey. She recommended continued therapy, support groups, and patience with ourselves as we learned to exist without Mom's oppressive presence. Ms. Chen explained the practical implications of the protective order. Mom would be served within 24 hours. Law enforcement would be notified. Any attempts at contact, whether direct or through family members, should be documented and reported immediately. The order would remain in effect for 2 years, with possibility of extension if needed. We left the courthouse as the sun broke through the clouds, an almost too perfect metaphor that made Leah actually smile. The weight I'd carried for years felt lighter, though not entirely gone. Legal protection was just paper and promises, but it was more than we'd ever had before. Over the following weeks, we settled into new routines. Leah returned to school with accommodations for her missed time, her professors' understanding about the family crisis. Without Mom's impossible standards, she discovered she actually enjoyed learning when it wasn't tied to survival. I continued at Stanford, no longer looking over my shoulder for Mom's interference. The financial aid office reversed the holds Mom had tried to place, recognizing her attempts as harassment rather than legitimate concern. My grades actually improved once I stopped fearing that anything less than perfection would bring punishment. Some family members respected the protective order, while others tested boundaries. We documented every attempt at contact, building a file that would support extending the order if necessary. The family divide deepened, but we found unexpected allies among relatives who'd quietly questioned Mom's methods for years. Leah joined a support group for perfectionist abuse survivors. Hearing similar stories helped her understand that Mom's behavior wasn't normal parenting gone slightly wrong, but systematic abuse. She began separating her own goals from Mom's imposed expectations, discovering interests she'd never been allowed to explore. We established new holiday traditions, just the two of us and our chosen family of friends who'd supported us. Victoria became a regular presence, her loyalty during the crisis transforming into genuine friendship. Our aunt visited monthly, helping us maintain family connections without compromising our safety. The therapy work was hard but necessary. We unpacked years of conditioning, learning to recognize the critical voices Mom had planted in our heads. Leah struggled with guilt over the protective order, still fighting the programming that made her responsible for Mom's emotions. I worked on my own tendencies tendency to hypervigilance, the constant alertness that had helped me survive but now exhausted me. 6 months after the hearing, Mom violated the protective order. She sent letters through a cousin, claiming she'd changed and deserved another chance. The letters showed no actual understanding of her abuse, only demands that we forgive her and restore her access to our lives. We filed a police report, and she received a formal warning. The violation actually helped our healing. It proved that the protective order had been necessary, that Mom's patterns hadn't changed despite legal consequences. Leah finally stopped second-guessing our decision, seeing clearly that Mom valued control over our well-being. We both changed our phone numbers and tightened social media privacy. The constant vigilance was exhausting, but preferable to the alternative. We learned to recognize flying monkeys, family members sent to gather information or deliver messages. Our documentation system became second nature. Leah discovered a passion for art, something Mom had dismissed as frivolous distraction from academics. Her paintings were dark at first, processing trauma through abstract expressions of pressure and suffocation. Gradually, lighter themes emerged: freedom, growth, sisterhood. Her first exhibition at a campus gallery felt like a triumph over everything Mom had tried to suppress. I found my own healing through volunteer work with students experiencing family pressure. Without naming my own experience, I could recognize the signs in others: the exhaustion, the fear of imperfection, the inability to celebrate achievements. Simply being someone who understood, who didn't judge them for struggling, felt like turning our pain into purpose. The protective order remained our shield, but we built our own armor too. Boundaries became easier to maintain with practice. We learned to recognize manipulation tactics in others, having been trained by an expert. The hypervigilance softened into healthy awareness. Mom made 2 more violation attempts over the year, each resulting in legal consequences. The pattern was predictable. She'd wait a few months, then test boundaries through different family members or institutions. Each attempt reinforced that our protection was necessary and justified. By the time a year had passed, we'd built lives that felt genuinely ours. Not perfect lives. We still struggled with anxiety, still fought those critical inner voices, still grieved the mother we'd wished for but never had. But they were lives free from impossible standards and conditional love. Leah graduated with honors, but more importantly, with health and happiness. She'd learned to value sleep over study substances, self-care over self-destruction. Her graduation felt like a victory, not because of the degree, but because she'd survived to earn it on her own terms. I approached my own graduation with mixed emotions. Stanford had been my escape route, but it had also been where I'd learned to exist independently. The campus that had once felt like exile now felt like the place where I'd discovered who I was without Mom's suffocating expectations. We maintained the protective order documentation religiously, knowing it might need renewal. Mom's patterns suggested she'd never truly accept the boundaries we'd established, but we'd learned to live with that reality, to build happiness despite her continued attempts at control. Our relationship as sisters had transformed completely. Without Mom's poisonous comparisons and manipulations, we discovered genuine affection and mutual support. We could celebrate each other's successes without competition, support each other's struggles without judgment. The bond Mom had tried to break became our greatest strength. As the second anniversary of Leah's OD approached, we marked it not with sadness, but with gratitude. That terrifying night had broken Mom's hold over us, forced us to confront the abuse we'd normalized. Leah's survival had given us both a second chance at life. We knew healing wasn't linear, that we'd carry some scars forever. There would be days when the critical voices felt louder, when the urge to achieve perfection felt overwhelming, but we'd learned to recognize those moments as echoes of abuse, not truth. The protective order had given us legal safety, but we'd built our own emotional protection through therapy, support systems, and most importantly, each other. We'd learned that real love didn't require perfection, that worthiness wasn't measured in achievements, that surviving and thriving despite abuse was its own form of success. Our story wasn't unique. Perfectionist abuse hidden behind academic achievement happened in countless families, but our escape was real, our freedom hard-won. We'd chosen our well-being over family approval, our lives over Mom's control, and in that choice, we'd finally found the unconditional love we'd always deserved, from ourselves and each other.